Welcome to Seasonal Stays and Campfire Days. I'm your host Josh, and today we're going to be talking about propane. So I have 5 different subjects that I want to touch on in this video. The first one being the most important one, and that is propane safety. The second subject that I want to touch on today is propane usage in your camper or RV. My third subject that I want to talk about is whether refilling propane tanks just like these two or swapping out a tank like this is better. Number 4 is how cold weather kind of affects the performance of propane. And number 5 is extending your supply. With that all being said, let's go on to propane safety. Before we even talk about safety, let's go ahead and talk about these 2 tanks that are right next to me. Now, most travel trailers are going to come with a 30-pound propane tank, which is this one right here. This is the one that came with our camper, the Keystone Springdale. We got 2 of these 30-pound tanks, so 60 pounds of propane total. But there are a lot of campers out there too that come with tanks just like this one. This is a 20-pound tank. Now, this one is a regular barbecue tank that you could get from one of those swapping deals. The reason why I'm bringing these 2 tanks up in particular is because you most likely need to transport these. Especially if you have parked your camper already and you ran out of propane and either need to get it refilled or swapped out. So the number one thing is you always need to transport these things safely, and that is propane must be turned off. The valve on top here, or the valve on top here, and these need to be stored and transported in this position upright, because the valve on top is not meant to hold the pressure of the propane inside. With the safety, you want to go ahead and inspect all of your lines on your RV, and that is including literally everything to make sure that nothing is leaking. Now, in order to do that, it is very simple. All you need is a spray bottle filled with water and dish soap, and that's it. So you take your spray bottle, and it's like a 50-50 mix of water and dish soap. So you just go ahead and you just spray that down onto the line and look for bubbles. If there are bubbles, you have a leak. If you don't have bubbles, you're good to go. Now make sure that you also know where your propane shutoff valve is. Now, each tank has the propane shutoffs on it, but most regulators will also have a propane tank shutoff, or just a regular propane shutoff. So if you suspect a leak or you have confirmed that there is a leak, make sure to shut them off. Keep tanks away from open flames. Now, this tank is empty, or partially empty, because we do use this one. This one really is not, I just brought it in just for the video. It's going back outside. And that's another thing too. Keep these in a well ventilated area. But this one's going back outside, but you see this fire behind me? It's not a real fire. So this, I'm not worried about it. But keep these things away from open flames, heat, direct sunlight. A lot of travel trailers will have a cover that goes on top of the propane tanks, so keep that on. In fifth wheels, they're usually on the sides inside of the RV, and the bottom of it is all open, so that's where your ventilation comes in. And my last part of this one would be install a propane detector inside your RV. Now, they're usually pretty cheap. I saw them go for about $50 on Amazon, but make sure it's an RV specific propane detector. It could save you a lot of money and even your life. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about propane usage in your RV. Your biggest things that you're going to pretty much have that use the most amount of propane is during the winter, your heater or your furnace and your water heater, and if you have a 2-way fridge. Now that's propane and electric. Some newer RVs and campers come with more electric appliances in them, so they don't really take up propane, but most of the time your stoves are going to go ahead and take propane. Now, with that being said, you want to make sure that you understand how to either read a propane gauge, which some tanks will have, where you can screw it onto the outlet on the tank, or you can go ahead and they make these things that go onto the bottom of the tank, and it's a little magnet. It goes on and it reads how much is in here, and it usually hooks up to your phone. Now, me personally, I have never used one of those like that, but I have done my research, and possibly in the future I will go ahead and let you guys know if I got one and how I like it. But if you're swapping out propane tanks, I would not recommend that, because they're going to be easy to leave onto that tank, and once they're gone, you're buying another. Okay, now refilling or swapping tanks. Now, this topic is pretty much the whole reason why I wanted to go and do this video to begin with. And that is that swapping propane tanks out like this is actually costing you more money than just filling up a tank like this, or even refilling one of these tanks. For convenience, yeah, swapping a tank out is easier, but with just a little bit more effort, you can go to a dealership, or you can go to your local propane dispensary or anything like that, and they'll refill it. Now, I've gotten mine refilled. Actually, I got this one refilled back for Thanksgiving over at a farm shop. Tractor Supply is also another good store that you can go ahead and get them refilled at, but they will refill these swappable tanks as long as the certification is good. And the same thing with these two, these 30-pound tanks. Now, you don't want to go and you don't want to swap out a 30-pound tank. It doesn't make any sense. You're getting rid of a 30-pound tank for a 20-pound tank. But in the long run, or pretty much right up front, most of the time, refilling propane tanks is actually going to save you money than swapping them out. So here's something to also consider when you are swapping out a tank. Now, a 20-pound tank, this tank is supposed to hold 4.7 gallons of propane. When you are refilling the tank, most of the time you're going to get that 4.7 gallons. If you swap these things out, there really is no telling how much you're getting, and most likely they're going to be underfilled. And here's the thing too, refilling a tank, it doesn't matter if I bring this tank in and it's halfway filled. Well, you're only paying for the refill of this tank, or the refill of this tank. Even so, if you just want to top tanks off, it's going to be way less, because now you're not spending to get a new tank. It just makes sense. Now, the upside, though, of swapping out a tank is that these things are usually inspected way more often than these tanks are. Now, if you are diligent about keeping these tanks up and checking on them, you'll never have a problem with these. Most likely. You'll never have a problem with these. But these are checked on a regular basis, so any little defect is most likely going to be caught. So that would be one positive to swapping a tank out. All right. We all know that some of us just do not do this, and that is cold weather camping. But if you didn't know, you're going to know now that the cold weather will actually affect your propane's performance. Inside of these tanks, if you've ever shaken one around, you can hear liquid inside these, which I think actually... I don't know if you can hear that or not, but there's liquid in here. That's what LPG is, liquid propane gas. But we don't see liquid running through the lines. We have a gas running through our lines throughout our trailers. So what happens is that the liquid evaporates into a gas. LPG evaporates into a gas at negative 44 degrees Fahrenheit, which means that in cold weather, you won't have as much evaporation, which means that you might have either pressure issues or you just might not get a full tank. We've actually experienced this because we've gone and we have camped in our camper in like negative 15 or negative 20 degrees. And we were constantly swapping out tanks to go and put it inside of a garage to go and heat up so that we can use the full tank. But to help combat this, they do make things like a blanket. It just slips right over and it's supposed to help insulate it a little bit more. And from what I have heard is that they do work slightly. I don't know if I would necessarily trust putting like an electric blanket around it, but just putting a sleeve or just putting a little bit of insulation around it to help keep some of that heat into the cylinder should help. Now make sure that your regulator too is free of any ice, because that can actually inhibit the flow of your gas going into your camper. So make sure that all that is cleared up and make sure it's protected too. That most of the time those regulators are covered. In the travel trailers, though, they're going to be right next to these propane tanks, probably most likely up on the tongue. In a fifth wheel, one side of your propane tank storage will have a regulator, a little flipper on it. Just make sure there's no ice or anything that's built up onto it. Now, my last thing is that in cold weather, obviously heat is probably going to be your number one priority. You're not going to get as much propane out of this tank as what you normally would during the summer. So just be prepared just in case if you run out of propane and you need to use a different heat source. All right, extending your propane for as long as you can. Now, if you're in a campground, this becomes a little bit more easier to do. So my number one tip for that, just don't use your furnace. Go ahead and get like a electric space heater, or a lot of campers are now coming with a fireplace and it's electric. So as long as it's not burning propane, you'll be able to stock up, because your furnace is going to be the number one thing, unless if you have a tankless water heater, is pretty much going to be your number one thing for propane consumption. Now, talking about water heaters, if you got a tankless water heater, you're kind of forced to use propane with this, because that's going to give you your best water hotness. If you are running a tanked water heater, good majority of them is going to have electric and propane. Just shut off your propane side and just use your electric. Again, if you're not paying for electric at a campground, just use the electric stuff. I mean, it's a no-brainer. The electric will take a little bit longer to heat up your water, but realistically, if you turn it on at night or just leave it on, you'll have enough hot water. And here's something. If you are doing an extended stay somewhere, they make kits where you can hook into a bigger propane tank. Now, remember what I said at the beginning. This is a 20-pound tank. This is a 30-pound tank. They make 50-pound tanks. They make 80-pound tanks. They make 100-pound tanks, 200, 300, 400, 500-pound tanks. If you're staying somewhere and you're really not traveling around too much, why not buy a 100-pound tank? Now, a 100-pound tank, that is, let's see, 30, 60, 90. It's at least 3 of these tanks plus a little extra. So that is also something to consider as well. Well, I hope that you gained some knowledge from watching this video, and I definitely do appreciate you guys watching the videos. So make sure that you comment down below, even if it's to say, hey, how's it going? Consider giving us a subscribe, and if you really like this video, go ahead and give this video a like. Really helps us and tells us to go ahead and keep making these videos. We'll see you in the next one.